Hey guys, Kitchen Table Magician here. Welcome to the pilot episode of Being Single. This is a series that I'm going to dedicate to singleton formats and building around decks that only have one copy of any one card outside of basic lands. My friends and I are always inventing new ways to do that. We enjoy, especially me, enjoys playing with as many different cards as you can instead of just boxing yourself into these 60 card decks that only play with maybe 10% of what Wizards actually prints. There are a lot of really good cards that can be played in casual formats, and so I love exploring everything that new sets have to offer, and one of the great ways to do that is singleton formats. I remember right from the beginning, back in 1994, when I got introduced to this game for the very first time, the starter decks that my brother and I had. We each had a revised edition starter deck, and so you just played with the whole deck. You just shuffled it up and went. And we didn't buy any booster packs or anything for these probably for a month or so after we had them. And I remember I had a Crawworm in mine. I remember that specifically. He had a Juggernaut in his, and I just remember what big threats these things were. We just didn't know any better at the time because we hadn't seen anything else. But I just remember playing with these and playing around these and how much fun this was in that kind of an environment, in a limited kind of an environment. It's also one of the reasons I enjoy limited builds with sealed packs. The only problem with that is it's a little pricey because you've got to buy 6 packs of cards every time you play. So you've got to invest $25 or $25, whatever it is. And then also drafting. I really enjoy drafting. But again, you usually have to bring sealed product to that. So, you know, there's a money investment in that. So with this series, I'm going to also talk about other ways to do that without having to buy new product every time. This episode, I think, for pilot episode, I think we'll just dedicate to Commander. It's a format that most of you are familiar with. And it's a format that Wizards actively prints product for, makes product for, and supports. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk about my first Commander deck, which if you're like me, and I think probably 90% of the people are, your introduction to Commander format was probably a sealed Wizards product. In my case, it was a 2015 sealed Commander deck around Meren of Clan Nel Toth, which is a card that Wizards designed specifically for the Commander format. You won't find it anywhere else. And so I was admittedly a little bit hesitant to buy a pre-made deck because I do enjoy building my own things and designing my own decks. But I thought, you know, for this first time out of the gate, I'll start with a pre-made deck and I'll play with it and I'll see if I actually like this or not. And if I do, then I can build my own things, or maybe this deck that I buy can be a starting platform to build something off of. And that's what turned out to be. I gutted it, rebuilt it, and made it go places that Wizards didn't make it go because they're not going to print some of the cards that I put in here. But, you know, that's how it is. Their ideas were good, and the execution was pretty decent. So, without further ado, I'm going to share with you my Meren of Clan Nel Toth Commander deck. So real quickly, the building guidelines for Commander are as follows. You build a 100 card deck. It is singleton except for basic lands, and you build it around a legendary creature. You can only build in that creature's colors. So in this case, black and green are the only colors of cards you can include in here. Like if I wanted to play something like a Derigaz the Igniter, I would not be able to include that in this Commander deck because it has the red mana symbol. So that would be illegal. So it limits you to what you can actually put in here. And it forces you to dig in a little deeper and find your synergies and stuff. When you are looking for a Commander to play around, you want to look for a legendary creature that does really cool things as long as he's on the table. So I find some of the legends that are just kind of like bigger beat sticky kinds of things and are just there to stomp don't make very good Commanders because they don't do anything really dynamic with the field so much as the gameplay goes. So somebody like this, like Meren of Clan Nel Toth, is an excellent example. And again, Wizards did design this specifically for it, but it does cool things. At the beginning of your end step, choose a target creature card in your graveyard. If that card's converted mana cost is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, return it to the battlefield, otherwise put it in your hand. And whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. So as the game progresses, you're going to get more and more experience counters, meaning you're going to just be able to put bigger threats right onto the battlefield straight up at the end of your end steps. This is a very powerful mechanic. This Dredge Golgari, making your graveyard an extension of your hand, is an extremely powerful mechanic. It's been fun to build around, and I love playing with it. So, yeah, let's get into the deck. Alright, so once you've got your commander picked out, then you're just looking to build basically a 99 card deck. And again, singleton. So, for this Meren of Clan Nel Toth, obviously we have all the basic lands in here that were included with the deck. Wizards also included a Polluted Mire, which is a swamp that cycles, and a Slippery Karst, which is a forest that cycles, and the 2 appropriate Vivid lands from Lorwyn block, which give you green, black, or a couple of counters for extra mana fixing, which I thought is kind of cool. They also included a few duels from different sets, Jungle Hollow, Tainted Woods, and a Golgari Guildgate. Okay, and then they provided for you a way to sacrifice a few creatures. It's very important in this deck with Meren's mechanic that you have sacrifice outlets so that you can fully take advantage of the ability to bring back a creature from your graveyard every turn. So a high market allows you to sacrifice a creature and gain a life anytime you want. And Grim Backwoods allows you to sacrifice a creature to draw a card. Okay, this deck also included an Evolving Wild and a Terramorphic Expanse, which I took out because we're only playing in 2 colors, and I replaced them with a Tectonic Edge, which allows you to destroy a non-basic land. And I put in Volrath Sronghold, which plays very, very well with this entire theme of graveyard recursion. It adds colorless mana to your mana pool, or it allows you to put a target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. So that's my land base for this deck. All right, moving into a few artifacts. This deck did originally have a Soul Ring in it that Wizards provided. I have since taken that out, not because it's a great card, but I had another deck I wanted to put it in, so I moved it to another deck. I did leave in the Golgari Signet that it was in here. Okay, Lightning Greaves is very important. You want to be able to protect your commander. You need to have ways to keep your commander on the battlefield and protect him if you can, because that's what your deck is built around. And Lightning Greaves is a very important piece. I think every commander deck should have a Lightning Greaves in it. So I have since built 3 or 4 other commander decks, and I've bought a Lightning Greaves for just about every one of them. And basically the equipped creature has Shroud and Haste. Skullclamp is really good in this build because if you're going to be sacrificing creatures, you might as well be drawing some cards while you're doing it. So this is really good for this particular build. This is a little bit of an oddball. This is Eldrazi Monument. Creatures you control get +1/+1, have flying and indestructible. At the beginning of your upkeep, you have to sacrifice a creature. If you can't, you sacrifice the monument. This is a little bit of an oddball for this deck, but I left it in there because it plays around a minor token theme that is also in this deck that Wizards had built in. I tried to stay as true to Wizards' intentions with this deck as I could while still stepping it up and just ramping it up. So Eldrazi Monument plays into a sub-theme that's in here that we'll get into a little bit later. All right, and then like any other deck that you build, you want to try to have ways to get into your mana ramp and get into mana early and fast. So I included a few things that Wizards forgot. I threw in a Llanowar Elves, and I threw in an Elves of Deep Shadow, and I threw in a Deathcap Cultivator. These are all mana ramp creatures, and it's very important to have that kind of thing. Okay, then Wizards did have a few really good pieces of removal in this deck, so I left them in here. There was a Sever the Bloodlines, which exiles a creature and has flashback, so you can use it twice. And there was a Putrefy in here, so I left that. That's very, very good. Destroys an artifact or creature. But then outside of that, I really wanted to rely on moving creatures in and out of my graveyard to do that work for me. See, these are non-creature cards, so they're basically one and dones. With creature cards, you can go over and over and over again. Okay, when you're playing a singleton format, you want to try and keep things as consistent as you can, and tutors are the best way to do that, and black does that better than any other color out there. So I went and found myself a handful of tutors of any different variety I could find so that I could really make sure that I'm pulling the cards that I want when I want them and when I need them. So I found a demonic tutor to put in here. I found a Beseech the Queen, which is just basically a tutor. I found a Diablolic Tutor. And then I found this guy, Rune-Scarred Demon. So he's not only a beater at 6/6 flying, but he's a demonic tutor on a stick, basically. So if you can bounce this guy in and out of your graveyard a few times, it's a demonic tutor every turn if you can pull it off. So it's kind of fun. Okay, also some not so obvious tutors that are really, really good in this particular deck. Jarrad's Orders for 4 mana. You get to search for any 2 creatures you want, put one in your graveyard, one in your hand. So you're getting a 2-for-1 tutor on this, and this is extremely good. And even better than that is Buried Alive. It lets you go into your library and put 3 creature cards from there into your graveyard. So it lets you tutor for 3 cards. And you got to keep in mind, with this kind of a build, especially, your graveyard is an extension of your hand. So this is incredibly powerful. And then I have a Dimir House Guard, which has Transmute, so it'll always be able to go get something with a converted mana cost or 4. Jarrad's Orders is a very good thing to go get. Also, another card a little bit later I'll talk about is also usually my prime target. I'll set that aside for a second. And then Fauna Shaman lets you discard a creature card and search your library for a creature card and put it into your hand. So you get to put one in your graveyard and then go find one out of your library and put it in your hand. This is very solid. All right. So oddly, Wizards did put in this token theme, a little bit of a go-wide token theme. And I guess it's good. You want to have creatures to sacrifice, right? So Saprolings are a good one. So Wizards included a Verdant Force, 7/7. At the beginning of each upkeep, put a Sapling creature token on the battlefield. So this is really good in multiplayer because it's every upkeep. So if you've got 3 or 4 players on the table, every time it goes around the table, you're going to get 3 or 4 Saprolings. And they included a Mycloth, which has Devour 2, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 Sapling token onto the battlefield for each +1/+1 counter on Mycloth. And then they included Pathbreaker Ibex, which is basically an overrun effect with legs. So when it attacks, creatures you control gain trample, get +X/+X, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. And then an Overwhelming Stampede, which is basically the same thing, but it's in spell form. And so I expanded on that theme a little bit. I found a Howl of the Night Pack to put in here. So you get 2/2 wolf tokens for each forest you control. And I found an Awakening Zone, which does a couple things for me. It provides creatures for me to sacrifice. It also provides creatures that I can use for mana. Because these Eldrazi spawn tokens, actually you can sacrifice for mana. So this is a really good card for this build. All right, so then moving out of that, back into some graveyard play. The deck did include a Victimize. This is really good. You sacrifice a creature and then get 2 out of your graveyard and put them onto the battlefield. So I kept that in here. This is very good. And then I threw in a Raise Dead, and a Recollect, and an Animate Dead, which allows you to go into any graveyard and pull a creature out of any graveyard and put it onto the battlefield as an enchantment effect. All right, then Wizards did include Butcher of Malachor in here, and this is probably the most powerful card that they included, in my opinion, for this build. 5/4 flying, so it's a beater. And it has, whenever this dies or another creature you control dies, each opponent must sacrifice a creature. So this will absolutely lock down the board for you if you can keep it on the table. This was so good. This is so strong for this deck that I knew I had to go find some more effects like this. I knew they had printed some cards like this, so I went and found those to go in my deck as well. They're both enchantments. The first one is Dictate of Erebos, which is flash. But it says whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. And it costs 5. And then even digging further back is Grave Pact, which only costs 4. And it's enchantment that reads basically the same thing. Whenever a creature you control is put in a graveyard, each other player sacks a creature. This is usually what I go get with Dimir House Guard because it is so ungodly powerful in this deck. If your opponents can't get Grave Pact off the table, it will just pin down the whole board. All right, then some combinations that were in the deck, or that are in the deck now that weren't there before. We have Jarad, the Golgari Lichlord. He gets +1/+1 for each creature in your graveyard, which isn't that big a deal because my graveyard stays mostly devoid of creatures because I keep bringing them back. His middle one, though, I really like. For 3 mana, sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. This is a win condition if done correctly. Also, I may sacrifice a swamp and a forest and return him from my graveyard to my hand, so he comes back. If I combine this with Lord of Extinction, this will just win you the game outright because you just sacrifice the Lord of Extinction. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in all graveyards, so you can wipe out an entire table just with one, by doing this maybe once or twice, you can get all that damage in just right here by sacrificing Lord of Extinction to Jarad. And then you need sacrifice outlets. So it's very, very important that you have lots of sacrifice outlets, because the idea is, again, is to be able to recur creatures from your graveyard back to your hand, back to the battlefield over and over and over again. So Fallen Angel is a very, very good outlet for that. You can just sacrifice a creature anytime you want just to give her a bonus. Nantuko Husk is extremely good for this as well. The Wizards build had a vampire that did this same thing, but I like the Husk better because it's a zombie. Golgari Lichlord has some nice interactions with this deck. It's a nice little 2-drop. You can sacrifice a creature to return one from your graveyard to your hand. Drooling Grudian has a nice little sacrifice a creature effect. It gives another one +2/+2 and another one -2/2 till the end of the turn. Hey, Graveshell Scarab I really like, because you can sacrifice it at will to itself for 1 mana, and you can draw a card, and it has Dredge 1, so you can bring it back on your draw phase if you want. And it's pretty big. It's a 4/4. Savra, the Queen of the Golgari. This is a lot of fun. Whenever you sacrifice a black creature, you may pay 2 life. If you do, each other player sacrifices a creature. And when you sacrifice a green creature, you may gain 2 life. So if you sacrifice a green creature, you can negate that lost life. All right, then the Wizards build did include a couple of just beaters. You have a 6/4 flying demon in Eater of Hope that sacks another creature to regenerate itself, or you can sacrifice 2 other creatures to destroy a creature. And so I left that in there. And Champion of Stray Souls is really nice. It's a 4/4. For 5 mana, you sacrifice X other creatures to return X creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So again, more just great recursion here. And also for 7, if he's in your graveyard, you can put him on top of your library. Caller of the Pack is just a beater that they included. And it's got this, it's an 8/6 trampler, but it has this myriad thing that they designed specifically for this set. And it's basically when it attacks, you create tokens, and it just goes wide, and those tokens die at the end of the turn. All right, so when you're building this kind of a deck, the creatures that you want to put in here, you want to build kind of a creature toolbox. You want creatures that just do all kinds of different things when they either enter the battlefield or leave the battlefield. You want to be able to just kind of deal with everything that your opponents might be throwing at you. So the most important one in this deck is Eternal Witness, which Wizards did include in the build, and it's extremely powerful. When Eternal Witness enters the battlefield, you may return any card from your graveyard to your hand. If you're doing this right, you should be recycling Eternal Witness every turn, so in some way or another, so that you're getting all other cards out of your graveyard as well. Like, you can do it, I've actually done this. You can play Demonic Tutor every single turn if you're doing things correctly and you've built things the way you want. And it's really fun to do, and it's fun to watch your opponent's expressions when you just start getting Demonic Tutor out of your graveyard every single turn. Okay, then just some utility stuff. Wall of Blossom 0/4. When it hits the battlefield, draw a card. So you can recycle this a couple times, get some card draw. Sakura Tribe Elder is a nice one to pull early so that you can get those land drops. It's also fun because you can sacrifice it to itself at will. So you play it, you sacrifice it, you get the land. At the end of your turn, you put him back in your hand and just rinse and repeat. Shriekmaw is really nice. It's removal. When it enters the battlefield, destroy a non-artifact, non-black creature. This was in the original build as well that Wizards put together. And it has Evoke, so if you do it for the Evoke, you get the effect, and then the creature goes right to your graveyard. You can bring him, put him back in your hand right away. Indrik Stomp Howler 4/4. When it comes into play, destroy an artifact or enchantment. Acidic Slime 2/2 Death Touch. Destroy an artifact, enchantment, or land. Viridian Zealot, a 2/1 for 2, and you can sacrifice this, which is nice that you can sacrifice it when you want, to destroy any artifact or enchantment. And then a few bigger things that they had put in here. Terastodon 9/9. When it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 3 non-creature permanents. This is really, really solid in multiplayer and commander format. To be able to hit multiple targets is incredibly good. But the downside is that every target's controller puts a 3/3 elephant creature token onto the battlefield, but that's not that big a deal in this format, and especially with this deck, you can deal with that. Phyrexian Plaguelord is a sacrifice outlet. He's a 4/4. You can sacrifice him if you need to put a to get give a creature -4/-4 till the end of the turn, or sacrifice any other creature anytime you want to give other creatures -1/-1. And then you have Cloud Thresher to deal with flying. This has Flash and Reach, 7/7. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to each creature with flying and each player. And again, it has this evoke thing, so you can do it for the 4 and then just send it right to your graveyard immediately and pull it back later. So some of the things I added that I thought were really good for this build. I put in a Gravedigger, 2/2. When he comes into play, return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Rotting Rats is another nice early one to pull. It's 1/1 for 2. When it comes into play, each player discards a card. So this works well for you, sucks for your opponents, and it has Unearth, so you can bring it back on your next turn and just play it right out of your graveyard for the Unearth, and then sacrifice it again so that it doesn't exile, and you've just got it in your graveyard ready to Unearth every turn. Infectious Host, 1/1. When it dies, target player loses 2 life. So this is a nice one. You can just sacrifice, get a few points of damage in while you're doing other things. Famish Ghoul, this is graveyard control. Sacrifice this and remove 2 target cards in any graveyard from the game. Kozilek's Predator gives you Eldrazi spawn tokens, so it plays well into the little bit of the go wide token theme that is in this deck. Okay, Yavimaya Elder is tons and tons of value. You get a 2/1 creature for 3. When it's put into a graveyard from play, search your library for 2 basic land cards and put them in your hand. And then for 2, you can sacrifice him to draw a card. So again, he sacrifices himself at will, which is so important. And you get a lot of value out of this. Vampire Hexmage is basically in here to deal with Planeswalkers. This is 2/1 for 2 black, first strike. Sacrifice this, remove all counters from target permanent. Basically, this card in my mind reads, sacrifice the Hexmage, destroy a Planeswalker. And then just a few other little pieces of removal that I put in here to finish the deck out. I have a Keening Banshee, 2/2 flying. When it comes into play, target creature gets -2/-2 till the end of the turn. And then, of course, the Mac Daddy, Necrotal. This is such a bomb. I've always loved this card, ever since it came out in Visions. 2/1 first strike. When it comes into play, bury a non-artifact, non-black creature. I remember when this card first came out in Visions, what a big deal this really was. This and Mana War were both in that set. And this was the introduction of, hey, your spells don't have to be the only things that do stuff. We can do this with creatures too. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. As always, love suggestions and comments. Thumbs up, crush the like button, and subscribe if you like this and want to see more of it. Till next time.